So, good morning and welcome back to the Namaste experience on this beautiful Monday. Oh, it's so beautiful and it's so nice to be back. Though I never really left. Not only with the miracle of modern technology was I able to be here and shine, even though I was sitting on the beach in the Bahamas. I know, it's tough. It's tough. But someone's got to do it. May as well be me. So I am just so grateful to be back and to to share some new insights that have been coming to me through the medium of story or parables. Parables, don't you agree, are one of the best ways for us to learn. This is why all the great teachers, including Jesus, taught in parables, especially when he was with the masses, because he knew that people would be able to access the inner meaning of the story from whatever level they were at. They didn't have to be at this level or that level, or they could simply relax into and receive the real message. So when I was in the Bahamas at the Shivananda ashram, there were lots of little things that would happen that I was able to garnish these parables and stories from. One of them happened when someone gave me a piece of bread. I was standing out on the pier, and they said, "Feed the bird or the fish. Use this to feed the fish." And I had an experience there, and so I wrote this parable to reflect that experience. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with this, which is called Crumbs of Bread. The initiate watched the Swami standing on the pier, his gaze focused beneath the gentle waves. When the Swami saw the young man, he said, "Come here, I want to show you something. If you look close, you won't see a single fish, though there are many hiding behind the rocks or in the deeper water. To gain their attention, I must throw a large piece of bread into the water." The Swami took a handful of bread and threw it a good distance from the pier. There was a great splash as the bread hit the water. Within seconds, a school of colorful fish, large and small, swarmed to the bread. But the piece was so big, none of them could get a single morsel of nourishment from it. "You see," the Swami continued, "the fish have come out of their hiding places because of the vibration sent out from the large piece of bread I threw, though they're still unable to eat a single bite." "So what was the purpose of throwing the large piece of bread into the water?" the initiate asked. "Is it only to gain their attention? Watch, and I'll show you," the Swami answered. Then he began breaking the bread into tiny pieces and sent them floating across the surface of the water. The two men watched as the fish spread out, each finding its own small morsel of bread to eat. "If I did not begin with a large piece of bread," the Swami said, "the fish would not feel the vibration of the water and they would not come to eat. But they also would not be able to digest such a large piece. So once they came, I gave them the tiny portions that they might digest with ease." The two men stood together on the pier for many minutes, breaking the bread into tiny crumbs so that the entire school of fish was well fed. So that's our first parable today. And that actually did happen. At first, when I went out and they gave me the big hunk of bread about that big, at first I was just breaking up little pieces and throwing them in the water, but no fish were coming. And then he came back, he said, "No, this is how you do it." Then he took a big handful and he threw it out, and then whoosh, they felt the vibration, they felt the splash, they felt the energy of that, the entry into the water, but they couldn't eat it because it was too much. But then, now that they were there, they were able to see the little crumbs that we spread out. It was so beautiful. The fish were so beautiful, of so many different colors. You probably know what it's like in the Caribbean. And it was while I was doing that that I realized it's very similar to what we do here. We may have to now and then throw out a big piece of reality, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to gain nourishment from it, but it gets our attention. That's the first step. We have to get the attention of whoever is there. And then we can begin to throw out the small pieces. And one by one, they find the piece that resonates the most from them. It might be a different piece of wisdom for every person here. Scott may hear one thing, Ravi may hear something else, but from each one of those small portions, maybe only a few words, something will spark their heart and they'll receive that nourishment. Once again, this is the beauty of parables. Maybe you heard something different. Maybe you heard something even deeper. And that's great, because we're all going to hear and receive the message at whatever level we're meant to hear and receive. How about one more? This is another lesson that I received on the pier. There is a wonderful Indian Swami that was at the Shivananda ashram, who I'm going to try and get here. I think I maybe mentioned that he looked as if he had just walked out of a Himalayan cave after meditating there for years. Very old, big white beard, all wrapped in the saffron cloth. And I was once again standing out on the pier, and he said, "Watch for the tiniest crack in your boat." But, oh, what does that mean? So after talking to him a little bit more and finding out what that meant, this is what I wrote. A man sought to buy a boat that would carry him to the other side of a great ocean. After many hours of searching, he found a man who agreed to sell him a suitable boat. But then he gave the man a stern warning, saying, "Stay alert that no cracks develop in the wood of the boat. It's very old, and the tiniest crack might lead to your destruction." How is it that a tiny crack might lead to my destruction? The first man asked. Even the smallest split in the wood lets in water. And if you're not mindful to seal the wood as soon as you notice the crack, drop by drop, it will fill the boat until you're submerged and drowned. So, remain ever alert for any of the illusions presented by the unreal self, for even the smallest has the power to drown you in the unreal world. Seek only that which keeps you afloat on the infinite ocean of grace, for then you will safely reach the other side. The tiniest crack in our boat. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of cracks still in the bottom of my boat. And if we let it get to that point, we're spending all of our time trying to seal those cracks. And this is where mindfulness comes in. If I'm mindful from the very beginning and I'm noticing where I'm slipping, where I'm making exceptions, where I'm compromising. Oh, it'll be fine if I drink tequila tonight, or whatever it may be. But then I drink tequila the next night and the next night. And before long, that boat starts to get filled with water. But what would happen if, as soon as that urge struck, so remember, this is not what I really want. This is not what my true desire is. It always comes back to this. Remembering what it is that my heart is longing for. As we arrived this morning with my friend, I mentioned we have a motto here. And it's not really a motto, it's really a way of being. Only love, only God, only now. I'm committed to getting that painted in different places. So if any of you want that on your casita, let us know. It's such a good reminder to remember that this is the only reason here to be here. This is the true longing of my soul, and nothing else, anything that draws my attention away, which ultimately leads to a tiny crack in the boat that allows that water to seep in or allows the ego to take hold, is not going to serve me. And we've been doing this long enough now to desire only that which serves the awakening. It's the only thing that's left to do. We've done everything else. I'm sure if we took the mass experience of everyone here in this room and everyone here in this room and everyone watching on YouTube, we could say, well, we've done it all. And yet here we find ourselves. This is where we are right now because we realize, we remember that there's only one thing. God is my source. I cannot be apart from him. That's the lesson today. God is my source. Love is my source. This is the only thing that is left for me to give my whole heart to, my whole soul, all my strength. The only thing that is left. And when I do, everything else falls into place. I'm lifted, as the parable said, upon that ocean of grace. And the sail begins to fly, it catches the wind, and I'm all the way home. Wouldn't that be great? To put up that sail and to know that the wind is going to take me all the way home. So this is where we begin our week. I'm going to be sharing more and more of these parables as we go. Don't you like, hearing this wisdom taught through story? Oh, my next book to be parables. Maybe. I was actually kind of thinking the same thing. So Scott has an amazing new book out. So many of you already know about masculinity. What is it? Mindful masculinity. And it's not just for men. But Scott did find, let's say, a gap where that message was very helpful, especially for men, but for all of us, really. And yet so many of those gaps have been filled now. So that writing a book about this or about that, it might just get lost in the din. But to have just stories, so we can learn like children, to hear something that inspires us in whatever format, I think is so beautiful. But I highly recommend his new book. It's quite good. It's filled with stories. Yes. So that being said, let's go ahead and turn it over to Vicky. And she may even have a story or two about me from the past, because she's been around through many incarnations. So good morning, Vicky. How are you today?
Good morning, Brother James. Welcome home. And good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It's a wonderful week. And of course, I love the idea of a parable because it is a little crumb. And whatever crumb that I seem to latch onto for the day seems to include everything that happens in my day. Have you guys noticed that? Whether you pick up the daily word or a Course in Miracles lesson or something that you look at perhaps every day, it's a crumb to the light, to the truth of what we are. And using it really is a way to seal the cracks in the boat for the day. And of course, I just came off a beautiful passage vigil for my Uncle Ernie. And it was really joyful, although the appearances did not always appear that way, because the gift of walking a brother home across the threshold of time into timelessness, it's a gift. And sometimes we get lost in the appearances. Now, one way that both Noreen, my sister Noreen, and her husband Harvey, the three of us were, that was our little mission, our little assignment was to celebrate Ernie, who was a pistol, let me tell you, was a hot ticket. He was a little bit irreverent, quite, and very outspoken. Oh my God, we used, like with my dad, Louis, he spoke sacred profanity. He was very adept at it. And he would insult, he was openly racist, openly prejudiced, but he was so wholehearted in it, almost because he was so wholehearted in it and so with such gusto that you couldn't quite take it seriously. What you took seriously was his wholeheartedness. This was Ernie. Ernie was just about being himself recklessly with abandon. He didn't worry about anything, because in his heart, he had love. This is true. No matter what he was saying or what he was expressing, you could feel the real love underneath it. So Noreen and I and Harvey going through this passage together, we had to keep our focus on his humor, his joy. He loved Elvis Presley. So Harvey found a great track of Elvis singing Love Me Tender, almost a cappella, so beautifully that we played that. And he was conscious most of the time, and he would squeeze our hands or he would move to give a sign of recognition. But the crumb that we learned, and together we had to do this because just the hygiene piece of walking someone home, the physical work that is entailed with all that. And I have to really applaud my sister and Harvey because they were meticulous. I'm more an impressionist. Oh, it'll be all right, throw a cover over them. But no, they were absolutely meticulous. And the meticulousness was their crumb. They knew to be meticulous. It was their way of being present and loving. And what I learned from all of it, from my sister Noreen, who James will tell you, very tender, very soft, very feminine. And I would say, oh, she's all mush and gush because, I was the tough one. I'm like rough and ready. Although, this year I'm working on tenderness. So I had my big tenderness lesson. So Noreen, I mush and gush. I would say she gushes over people. I mean, she does, but genuinely. And she just gushes and gushes and her hair's falling in poor Ernie's face. And I say, Noreen, your hair's bothering his face. At least pull your hair back. And she's saying, I love you, Ernie. I love you, Ernie. And holding his hand and loving him up, gushing all over him. And I sat there and I said, this is time I get this. And my heart filled because not that I'm cold and distant, maybe I am, I don't know, but I'm not quite as gushing, not overtly expressive the way my sister is. But she gave me the greatest example of realizing that Ernie never married, he never had children. That's why it kind of fell into our hands to be the one to walk him across that threshold. But Noreen gave him a gift of tenderness and gushing and total, when I say wholehearted love, I mean wholehearted love because she knew to be just present in the midst of all the physical activities that are involved with someone at that stage. She knew the most important thing was simply to let him know he's loved, loved, loved. And I woke up learning that in a way that I knew it here, and I've been practicing it with my mindfulness and my attention. But it struck like Cupid striking an arrow into my heart. I said, Noreen, I will never make fun of you being mush and gush or gushing over anyone ever again. You gave Ernie something he has probably never experienced in this lifetime. And at this point, it was literally heaven on earth, literally heaven on earth, because the room was abounding with grace and with that gushing of love. That's what real love is. Real love, just like we say in the morning, love has given us everything. We give everything to love. Love really does give us everything. But when I have been hesitant or a little cold or withdrawn or not quite so openly giving of myself, that's a crack in my boat. and I'm on that crack. So I wanted to mention that and mention the joyful moment when the three of us were together. We all knew, like we had gotten up in the morning and we all knew this is about the time. We just all felt it. See, you move in, love brings you into a knowing where perception kind of slips away and there's simple knowing. And we were all just with him. And very simply, he took his last breath. Very simply to Elvis again. Harvey was playing Love Me Tender to Elvis. And very simply, we were all around his bed, all of us at this point, just being with him and being with him in that tenderness and in that fullness of love. And he just rested right into heaven because we had spent 3 days resting into heaven with him, and he brought us with him. It was the most peaceful, and everyone knew. Everyone in the family came the day before and found out there's a Maronite priest in church the day before. But the storyline of simply now, simply loving now, simply loving whatever's in front of us and not worried about anything else, none of the details, none of the past, none of the future, simply now. And as far as James goes, one of the best experiences I've seen with James, it's in the little things, in the little things. James loved my sister Noreen the minute he met her. So didn't you?
I did.
Because
And your
he
dad kicked me
did.
out of the house because of it.
Oh yeah, Louis, my father kicked him right out. Oh no, not my daughter. Get out of here. Take your guitar and you get out. But that vision and that communion that Noreen and James established together was a great example. You know, they talk about agape love, eros love, this filial love, this love, that love. Love is love. Love gives of itself 100%. You don't have to categorize it. If you're categorizing, it's because there's a crack in the boat, in your love boat there. That's what this love, filial love, eros love, romantic love, all these different, everything. Love is universal. It only gives of itself 100%. And James and Noreen were the experience of love. And I remember watching it. And Noreen didn't want anything back. James, I can't speak for. He always has an open concept of what can be experienced in the moment.
You never know.
You never know. And Louis put a lid on it. But but my watching them in retrospect as well as in the moment, I was so grateful that that you had, James, at that time, someone that saw you, really saw you before books, before any things that you were doing. But my sister Noreen always has a capacity for joining at a soul level. And she saw James' soul and has loved him ever since, without any design, without any expectation, without it looking ever a certain way. And James the same. And it's a story of true love. I would say a genuine story of communion and true love.
Yes.
And both of you able to come into communion at a soul level and then express it freely at this level. However, that's what heaven on earth is. Connect. What Noreen says is she harmonizes to the soul. That's a crumb. Harmonize to the soul of your best friend and your worst enemy. It doesn't matter. Harmonize to the soul and then be with that communion and let love express on earth as it is in heaven. And it does, because
Yes.
the soul only loves, and there's no definition of withholding anywhere in it. So, Brother James,
Exactly.
that was a great demonstration. There are probably more things I can't say at this moment, but
Well,
that was
I would
great.
love to close with one final story, not really a parable, but just to give you more of an idea of what Vicky's family is like. I remember, yes, as Vicky said, there was always this just deep love with her whole family, Noreen in particular. I wish we could get Noreen on here to share sometime, but even though she gushes with wisdom and truth just as her sister does, she's a bit more shy about it. As you can see, Vicky is not shy about it. But I remember when I was there, when I was staying at their house, uh, their father Louis, who was all about 4 foot tall, but more energy than you could ever imagine. He definitely kicked me out because he saw that, and he was very protective of Noreen. So here's a little story about that to close. I'm sure we'll find some spiritual significance to it. So Harvey is our dear friend, and Harvey was driving down one of the highways there in Boston, and he said that he literally heard George Burns as God in the back seat saying, "Go see Louis right now, Vicky's dad." So he immediately just pulled off the highway, had no idea. Actually, I think the voice said, "Louis has a wife for you." Is that right, Vicky? I think that's it.
Yes,
Louis.
Louis has a wife for you. It's 11 o'clock at night, and he showed up at the door. I have to see Louis. I said,
He
okay.
shows up at the door, and Vicky opens the door. Says, "Oh, Harvey, what are you doing?" He says, "God told me I have to go see your dad. He has a wife for me." So you have to remember that at this time, Vicky was still married to Teddy. So and Louis is in his bed. Harvey goes up and tells him this story. He heard this voice of George Burns in his, and you remember, "Oh God," right? That was what the voice was. And he said, "Go see Louis. He has a wife for you." Louis sits up in his bed and says, "You can have Vicky." And Harvey says, "But Louis, Vicky's already married." "Oh, I don't mean that Vicky. I mean Aunt Vicky." Now, Aunt Vicky was probably 20 years older than Harvey at that
And
time.
that's Ernie's sister, Aunt Vicky.
Ernie's sister.
Is
Okay.
Ernie, my godmother, Ernie's sister. Yep.
Yeah. And so finally, Louis says, you can have her, but if you touch Noreen, I'll kill you." So what does he do? He marries Noreen, and they've been happily married ever since. And what did your dad say when that happened? "Oh, I was just trying to what?"
Oh, he said that was reverse psychology. I knew he was supposed to marry Noreen. And I'll tell you one also. Years before that, on another marriage Harvey had, we were all up in Noreen's bedroom, and I got this message: Noreen, Harvey's not supposed to marry. It was Bernice. He's supposed to marry you. And I said, I just know it. And so we all got up and went to the wedding. And Harvey sees us at the back of the church, and at the back of the temple. It was a Jewish wedding. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Am I supposed to stand up and say, because Noreen certainly wasn't going to. And but we did go to the wedding, and we were a presence. And he did get married. The rabbi did not ask, who does anyone have any reason these two shouldn't get married? But I was ready to. I was ready to follow, which now I'm thinking, oh, I was out of my mind. And but he did marry Bernice, and later he ends up with Noreen. How it's meant to be.
Yes, exactly. All we have to do is trust. And that's what
Yeah.
happens when we seal all the cracks in our boat. You see, we come back to the original lesson. That's all we have to do is just be mindful. Notice when those cracks develop. Notice when the ego starts to slip in. And before it gets to the point where it's an emergency, feel that little crack so we can still float above this ocean of grace all the way home. And so we say together, Amen, 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 y
Y
punto.
punto.
So sail that boat, everyone. We love you. Have a
Peace, love.
beautiful day.
Many blessings.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you too.